Of course, we got a JJ video. Today, we're going to be reacting to how politicians dress around the world. Now, around the world, you have many continents, many countries, many cultures, many traditions. So I believe there's probably going to be 3 or 4 different ways. You're going to have like the Western world of like suit and tie, like, you know, that type of look. You're going to have military looks for people that are, you know, maybe more developing countries are going to have more, maybe a military look for politicians. You're going to maybe have some religious figures. You might have some traditional, like when I say traditional, maybe like some outfits that might look more towards the culture of 1,000 years ago or something. I'm excited to jump right in. Let's go.
Hello friends, my name is JJ, and this fellow's name is Raleigh YTT, and he was elected to the Parliament of New Zealand last year.
Maori.
He's also the joint leader of Te Pāti Maori,
Maori, that's what it said.
Fringe party representing a fairly intense wing of New Zealand's indigenous rights movement. As you can tell from his facial tattoo, he is a man who embraces his heritage in quite a fierce and uncompromising way and doesn't care much about trying to fit in, and thus conflict was inevitable. New Zealand uses the British parliamentary system, which remains governed by certain gentlemanly codes of conduct that haven't changed much since Victorian times. One of these was that all male politicians must wear neckties when in the chamber, and from his first day in Parliament, Mr. YTT wanted none of this.
Take the noose from around my neck so that I may sing my song. Therefore, I will adorn myself with the treasures of my ancestors and remove the colonial noose around my neck so that I may sing my song. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
In theory, this defiance meant that YTT couldn't participate in government since the Speaker wasn't supposed to call on people who didn't obey the dress code.
Mr. Speaker, no, I've indicated to the member that I will not call him when he is not properly dressed.
Dang. Y'all some uptight people over there.
The member will resume his seat. No, the member cannot take a point of order.
Not without your tie. You must be wearing your tie. That's absurd.
The member cannot take a point of order. I do not recognise the member. He will now leave the chamber.
But then last week, the Speaker decided that this was not a battle worth fighting, and so the tie rule was officially abolished.
Good for them.
In much of the Western world, when we think of a politician, we think of someone who looks like this, a man in a dark suit with a matching jacket and pants.
That used to be my governor when I lived in Florida. Ron DeSantis.
A collared shirt and a colored tie. This look has been standard European business attire for nearly 200 years. Men have been wearing modern style suits since—
Now, let's be honest. No one—
business attire for nearly 200 years.
No one's rocking these 3-piece plus. Well, some people are rocking 3-piece, but no one's rocking these suits, which I think if we are going to wear suits, let's do this.
Men have been wearing modern style suits since at least the early 19th century, when the modern cut of jackets became more or less what it is now, and pants replaced tights. Modern neckties only date to the 1920s or so, but men have been wearing some sort of thing around their neck for much longer. Despite lasting for almost 2 centuries, this style of dress for politicians was ultimately unsustainable, however, because as countries got more democratic, it was inevitable that eventually some people would get elected who wouldn't want to dress this way.
I can't stop to think, but I forget what his name is. Believe he's either a representative or a senator from Pennsylvania. You guys know, if you know, you know. I'm blanking, but he is the star student of I'm not going to dress any way you tell me to dress.
Starting with women. When you look at photos of some of the first women to get elected to things around the world, you'll notice that their outfits tend to be extremely conservative, with long dresses and sleeves and all the rest. This was both because they were trying to fit in with the men, and also because women in those days were just expected to dress conservatively all of the time.
Yeah.
Not so much these days, of course. In the United States, 1969 is often held up as the symbolic moment in which female politicians first started wearing pants, given that was when Congresswoman Charlotte T. Reed claimed to have done it for the first time. A female senator didn't wear pants until 1993, however, and Margaret Thatcher, who ran Britain from 1979 to 1990, was proud of having never worn trousers during her entire prime ministership. But
That's an entire different thing, though. That's an entirely different thing, especially when you are surrounded by royalty, and when the British Crown even had more oomph to it than it does today. That makes sense. It does make sense. But who cares if she did?
even the pantsuit look, which has become so iconic of Western female politicians over the last few decades, seems to be going the way of the dodo as well. In 2017, US Speaker of the House Paul Ryan officially allowed women to wear sleeveless tops if they prefer.
It took that long.
Leading to this triumphant photo op by some of the women of Congress. But it's not just women who have benefited from an increasingly lax political dress code. 2017 was also the year that the Speaker of the British Parliament officially allowed men to not wear neckties
Dang.
if they so chose, with the French Parliament going even further, saying men didn't even have to wear jackets. In other places across Europe and North America, many politicians are starting to notice for the first time that their governments might not even have a dress code on the books at all.
Dress code is so stupid. Now, if you're a traditionalist, if you're a conservative, you're probably mad at me right now. But guys, let it be the substance of our words and our actions, not what we wear. Unless what we wear is of substance, and that disregards whatever.
Meaning there's nothing to stop them from going full casual if they so choose. It's a classic example of a social convention that only exists so long as people choose to play along with it. Now obviously, plenty of people will oppose this trend, which is often framed as being anti-tradition, but it's also worth remembering that politicians didn't get all dressed up in the old days because they thought they were putting on some special costume to signify that they were some entirely different class of person. They got dressed up because dressing up was just what people used to do all the time for anything even
Yeah, like if you go to like a 1920s like view, like New York City, nearly every woman's in like a crazy dress. And then every man is wearing a top hat, a cane, and a three-piece, no matter what age. So it's not a position that holds the weight of what someone wears. It's really the time.
remotely important. I remember my grandfather, for instance, would put on a suit and tie just to go to the movies. So it makes sense that people of that generation would get dressed up to go to Parliament too. But as cultural norms shift and most of us increasingly only get dressed up for like a wedding or a funeral, and often not even that, it does start to make our politicians seem a little bit more culturally
Fetterman. I remember the guy's name, Fetterman.
alienated from the people they purport to represent if they're following some ostentatiously formal dress code that only applies to them. So in conclusion, I would not be surprised at all if we someday saw a president giving an Oval Office address looking like this.
That's still kind of dressed up. Kind of. That's a button down. But it would be, if Trump would never. But if Trump tomorrow was wearing something like that, people would go crazy. If anyone was. Like, we had like that absurd, like a couple months ago, what was it, like February or March, where Zelensky was in the Oval Office in not a suit. People were livid about that. But who cares? It's a sign of respect. Who cares? Let respect be shown with your words and actions for the last time. Heck, if I was president, I would wear this. What are you going to do?
If anything, we in the West would just be playing catch-up to some other parts of the world. So this is Daniel Ortega, for instance. He is the president of Nicaragua. I don't think he has ever worn a suit and tie during...
Well, that's still pretty Conservative.
During his entire time in power. Not at his inauguration, not at military parades, not at international summits, not at Hugo Chavez's funeral. President Ortega is this very radical left-wing character, and he wears normal clothes as a way of presenting himself as a normal guy who isn't part of the ruling class. Though looking at some photos of the Nicaraguan parliament, I must say he doesn't seem like the only guy who came up with this idea. Indeed, Latin and South America in general seems to be on the bleeding edge of abandoning formal wear for politicians, in part because of the big role that anti-elite populism has come to play in the politics of those places. The former president of Uruguay, Jose Mujica, made a big show of never wearing a tie, which he called a useless rag of hyper-consumerism. He often showed up to public events looking a little, shall we say, relaxed. There was actually a phase when there was a bunch of
Why not, bro?
presidents all across Latin and South America who were united in their refusal to wear ties or even suits, though the guys who have since replaced them have all gone back to the old ways. The new young president of El Salvador, however, never wears a tie, not even in his official portrait. He often wears normal clothes when doing official business, even when it makes him look like some sort of Disney Channel kid who wound up as president because he found a magic lamp or something. Then there are countries whose leaders are quite partial to the logic of Mr. YTT and have stopped wearing Western-style clothes because they see it as a symbol of colonialism and imperialism and so forth. India is probably the best example of a country that has pretty much universally ditched the Western-style business.
I mean, it's traditional. That's what I was saying. Like, wear what you feel like you should wear.
Business suit at a political level, even though I know some Indians find this to be a bit of an affectation by their leaders, given that plenty of Indians wear Western-style suits all the time. There are a few countries in Africa whose presidents almost exclusively now wear traditional clothing instead of suits, including Nigeria, Chad, the Gambia, and Niger. Overall, however, this idea that African politicians only wear colorful, billowy robes is probably more of a Hollywood stereotype than most of us from outside of the continent realize. Only last year in Kenya, for instance, where politicians of that country allowed to wear traditional clothing in parliament. The rulers of some of the more fundamentalist Muslim countries never ever wear Western clothing.
Duh.
However, you will see Joe Biden dressed like the King of Saudi Arabia long before you will see the King of Saudi Arabia dressed like Joe Biden. The Islamic Republic of Iran is an interesting case, though, because even though a lot of their politicians buck the fundamentalist trend and do wear Western-style suits, neckties have actually been illegal in that country since the Islamic Revolution of 1979.
Wow.
So you will never see an Iranian president wear one. Overall, however, I would say that the most common tradition around the world is for most politicians to just dress in the Western way, while also allowing politicians from certain officially recognized minority groups to wear their traditional clothing in a gesture of accommodation. It's become a tradition for minority members of the Chinese Congress, for instance, to wear their traditional costumes at the state opening of parliament. I don't wear this kind of clothing normally. It's not very convenient, says a Uyghur member of parliament in this 2018 Reuters story, but I'm a representative of my people, so this is what I should wear here. I mean, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. This is a very good example of how symbolic gestures can't necessarily be taken as evidence of more meaningful forms of political tolerance. But in any case, this tradition is a very common thing in many very diverse parts of the world, like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Indonesia, and even in the US. We recently saw the first ever Korean-American female member of Congress wear a traditional Korean dress on
I never saw that.
her first day. And back in 2004, former Colorado Senator Benjamin Nighthorse Campbell,
That's a crazy middle name.
who was also a Native American chief, famously
That makes sense. That's crazy.
wore his full Indian
What?
regalia on the floor of the Senate. Of course, there are also some countries where more practical considerations take precedent. In the Philippines, for instance, male politicians often wear this style of shirt, known as a barong, whenever they're doing official stuff. That's partially a nod to their culture, but it's also a nod to the fact that the Philippines is just a very hot country, and wearing wool suits all the time would probably be a little much. Politicians in other tropical places also tend to put comfort above formality. The British colony of Bermuda is the only place I know where you're allowed to wear shorts in Parliament, however. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little tour of political dress codes of the world. I know this is a very rich topic, so if you have any other good examples of unusual or colorful things politicians have worn over the years, please drop them in the thing below.
Crazy fun video. Yeah, John Fetterman, if you search him up, it's hilarious what he usually wears, like a hoodie and shorts. I think he's still, I don't know, I think he's a senator or representative, one of the two. Pretty sure that's right. Well, yeah, guys, the thesis is, why does it matter what you wear? Now, I understand in some traditional offices, there's a precedent that shall not be infringed on. Like, there's some precedents that make sense, right? So I guess it just depends. But honestly, does it really matter? Does it really matter? Let's focus on feeding the hungry. Let's focus on making peace. Let's focus on making the country work better. Let's not focus so heavily on dress code. But I understand on the traditional format. But at the other side of the table, I don't. Let me know your thoughts below. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, and bye-bye.